This video will be concerning itself with the AMCD My Library. Previous videos have dealt with other parts of the ArchiveMethod system. The four largest pieces of the ArchiveMethod ecosystem are the ArchiveMethod database, the ArchiveMethod component, AMC, the AMCD_list4d commands, and the AMCD My Library. The first three come with a distribution. The last two are text files that provide data to the ArchiveMethod component. As we have seen in other videos, it's possible to modify the AMCD list4d commands text file, but a copy still comes with the original distribution. The AMCD My Library file is unique, however, in that it does not come with a distribution and is entirely a file to be created by the user. Its purpose is to facilitate the moving of methods from one database to another. Since we have an ArchiveMethod database, which is a repository of all the user's methods across all the databases under development, we have a great resource for creating a new database with pieces from old databases or refactoring an existing database. It's easy enough to export a single method from the ArchiveMethod database as a text file and bring it into a new database. But the My Library mechanism is more suitable when importing a multitude of methods. The three major actions that the user performs with regards to the AMCD My Library are creation, deployment, and utilization. We'll go through all of these steps. The first is to create the file. To create the text file, we go to the Export menu of the ArchiveMethod database and choose multiple methods. You can see here there's a button labeled AMCD My Library. The list of methods on the left side consists of the most recent versions of all the methods of any particular name throughout any of the databases. The last modified date is provided in a column on the right side. For AMCD My Library, we want only project methods. In fact, if we select something other than project methods, we will see that we can no longer create a file. So we'll go back and make sure that project methods is selected. To create this file, one selects some or all of the methods from the list box on the left side, and then you push the AMCD Library button to create the text file itself. You can make a sub-selection by clicking on some of the listings on the left side. And you could restrict it to a single database, and that might be appropriate under certain circumstances. Perhaps if you are rebuilding your database from scratch, it would be nice to have only the methods from earlier versions of that same database available for potential transfer into the new version. But probably the most common scenario is one in which the My Library file is created from all of the available methods of all of the existing databases. For this demonstration, we will simply select them all. The mechanism excludes methods that start with the name compiler because in general it's not appropriate to be transferring those methods to a different database. A dialog box comes up to tell you that the My Library file has been created and to inform you of where it was stored, which would be the root folder. The next step is to deploy this file that we've created. As an example, we will use the TIDE database. Now we could use the participating database item under the miscellaneous menu to direct the new file into the correct location for the TIDE database. But to explain the process more explicitly, we'll do this manually. We'll navigate our way to the AMC component inside the TIDE database and look in the resources folder of that component, which is where the My Library file should end up. We will add the My Library text file that we just created to this location. We will go to the root folder, find this folder labeled Importable Method Library, and inside of that is the AMCD My Library file, and we'll go ahead and add that to the resources folder. At this point, that data file for this component has been deployed. The next step is to demonstrate how it is utilized. To do that, we'll go back to the TIDE database and actually open it up. Under the Run menu, we'll go to the Method menu item and select at the bottom of this listing the Open Command Center. And this is where we control what methods will be imported from our My Library into the TIDE database. You've seen this window before. We've used it to export legacy methods and to create information files. Now we're interested in the blue region on the right side of the window, which is the interface that allows us to move methods from the My Library file into the database that we're currently working with, which we call the host database. In the left list box are all of the methods that exist in the host database. In the right list box is all of the methods that exist in the My Library file. If we need to refresh our memory about any given method, we can look at the code in the small windows below. Now, if we wanted only to bring a single method across, we could select a method in the library, copy its code to the clipboard, and create a new method in TIDE and simply paste in the contents. But there's a much slicker way to accomplish the same thing, particularly when you're considering moving multiple methods. There are really two fundamental choices. You can elect to show in the right list box all the methods that exist in the library that do not exist in the TIDE database. Alternatively, you can show methods that exist in the library which have the same name as methods that already exist in the TIDE database. But to show up in this listing, they also have to have a more recent modification date and in fact also different content. So this is not a simple clone of that. When you're looking at the lists in this mode, you can see the two versions of the database of the methods of the same name, and you can see the dates of modification, which of course, as I've described, are always going to be more recent in this listing on the right. If we are looking at the listing, we can select one or more of these methods and simply bring them into the TIDE database. What will happen is that they will replace the current equivalents in the TIDE database under the general assumption that these more recent versions represent modern, better code than the older versions present in the TIDE database. But what we're going to do in this demo is actually bring across some methods from the library that do not have an equivalent in the TIDE database at all. So we're going to click on this Not in Host Radio button. So now we have a listing of all these methods, and all of these methods do not have an equivalent in the TIDE database. Suppose we've written a lot of code to deal with HTML for other projects. This, however, does not exist in the TIDE database, but we want to bring it across. Our goal is to bring all of these HTML methods that exist in the library and put them in the TIDE database. So I'm going to look at all these HTML methods which are collected here under RxHTML, and I'll select that entire grouping. And now I have an opportunity to bring them over to the TIDE database. So we'll go ahead and click on Bring into TIDE. And what will happen is that in a very short time, all of those are now brought over into the TIDE database. And if we go look, you can see that in fact they all now exist here. If we go back to this and look at not in host, we can see that those RxHTML files methods no longer exist here. The reason is simple, that they now do exist in the host and therefore are not listed here. So we are done. To reassure ourselves that these methods actually have been transferred, we can look at the project method listings and go down and find the RxHTML methods here that were transferred. All of them exist. We could look at any one of them, and that is how you add methods from the My Library file into any given database. Thank you for your attention.